This day in sports history.
Hey, I'm golf broadcaster Matt Adams. The updated and expanded second edition of my book, The Golf Round I'll Never Forget, Golf's Biggest Stars Recall Their Finest Moments, is now available. Readers can expect to march with Arnie's Army at the 1960 U.S. Open, relive Jack Nicklaus's remarkable 1986 Masters win, and be amazed by the Tiger Slam. The Golf Round I'll Never Forget, Golf's Biggest Stars Recall Their Finest Moments. Pick it up where fine books are sold, including BarnesandNoble.com and Amazon.com.
It's that time again. It's another This Day in Sports History. Hey there, and thanks for checking back into the podcast. Your support is greatly appreciated. You know, if you like the podcast and you haven't rated it yet, go ahead and give some stars. 5 stars would be the preferred number of stars. If you're listening on Apple, you could leave a nice comment. Okay, enough with the prelims. Time to get moving with the show. And there are a lot of stops along the way today, so you may want to get a snack and then settle in. But let's go to what happened on this day in 1999, when Justin Leonard dropped a bomb to bring the Ryder Cup back to the U.S. When dawn broke in Brookline, Massachusetts on this day in 1999, things did not look so good for the Americans. They trailed the Europeans by 4 points and stared at the stark probability of losing their third straight Ryder Cup. No team had ever recovered from a deficit greater than 2 points on the final day to win the Ryder Cup. But American captain Ben Crenshaw was not ready to package up the cup in bubble wrap and send it back to Europe. After Saturday's action, he addressed the media, and I don't know if you'd call it a premonition, but he just had a gut feeling.
I'm going to leave y'all on one thought, and I'm going to leave. I'm a big believer in fate. I have a good feeling about this. That's all I'm going to tell you.
Crenshaw knew he needed something dramatic to happen in the 12 singles matches, and it needed to happen early. So he sent his strongest out first in the hopes that they could pick up some early points and put some pressure on the Euros. Mark James, the European captain, backloaded his lineup, sending his strongest off last. Things could not have gone better for the Americans in the early matches. In fact, it was a proverbial bloodbath. It's golf. Ain't nobody bleeding for reals out there, but just understand that it was deeply in favor of the U.S. Davis Love III delivered the first point with an utter destruction of Jean Van de Velde, 6-5. Then Tom Lehman closed out Lee Westwood, 3-2. An interesting pairing in the early matches was Phil Mickelson versus Sweden's Jarmo Sandelin. These two had a little history going back 3 years to the old Dunhill Cup. In the 1996 version of the Dunhill, Sandelin beat Mickelson head-to-head, but he mocked Phil with strange rifle shooting gestures during the match. The U.S. crowd on this day remembered that, and they were pretty harsh on Sandelin as a little payback. Mickelson dismissed the Swede 5-3. The lead was now just 1. Still a lot of golf to play, but things were starting to get a little bit snug. Hal Sutton erased the deficit completely with a 4-2 beatdown of Darren Clark. The bloodletting continued with David Duval hammering Jesper Parnevik 5-4. The Americans now led for the first time in the week. There was a little controversy in the Tiger Woods-Andrew Coulthard match. The animosity was running a bit high. Sergio Garcia's celebration the day before had irked a lot of the Americans in the gallery, and watching their squad get their butts handed to them was not pleasant. So now, with the tables turned, things got a bit out of hand. But in the Woods-Coulthard match, Coulthard hit an errant shot into the deep rough. A search for the ball did not uncover its hiding spot, and after 5 minutes, it was declared lost, and a penalty stroke assessed. After the match, though, Coulthard's caddy accused the marshal on the hole of concealing the ball until after the 5-minute time period had elapsed. Woods went on to win 3-2 in the match. When Steve Pate beat Miguel Angel Jimenez 2-1, the Americans had won the first 7 matches of the day to completely swing the momentum. Crenshaw's plan was working perfectly and paying huge dividends. Padraig Harrington and Paul Lawrie snatched back 2 points to breathe life back into the Euro Cup defense. Jim Furyk beat Sergio Garcia to get the U.S. to 14 points, which secured at least a tie. But in order to retake the cup, the Americans needed to get to 14.5 points. That was the magic number. A tie would allow the Euros to hang on to the cup another 2 years. Justin Leonard was not having a good Ryder Cup weekend. He'd played 3 matches Friday and Saturday, and he'd lost all 3. After the 10th hole in his singles match with Jose Maria Olazabal, he was 4 down, meaning he needed to outright win 4 holes in the final 8 to get level and grab a half point that the Americans desperately needed now. He got a little bit of help from the Spaniard, who bogeyed 4 straight holes. When Justin holed out a 35-foot putt at 15, the match was even. The decisive hole was the 17th. Leonard had a 45-foot uphill left-to-right putt. Here's Roger Maltby, Johnny Miller, and Dick Enberg with the call for NBC that day.
Leonard could somehow win this hole, the matches are over. This looks good. Oh, my!
The Americans celebrated a lot, and a bit prematurely. Olazabal still had a 20-foot putt with about the same line as Leonard's putt to have the hole. That would have sent the match to the 18th all square, with the chance for Olazabal to win the match. Analyst Johnny Miller understood the breach of etiquette, and he chastised the Americans' jubilation.
Americans really should compose themselves here. It's really very poor sportsmanship on the U.S.'s part there.
And Leonard recognizes it and trying to get control of everyone. Olazabal still with a putt to have the hole.
The European team surrounding the green thought several of the American players intentionally trampled over Olazabal's line. Once order was restored and Olazabal was allowed to hit his putt, it slid by on the left, giving Leonard the one-up lead. There was no need to play the 18th. The Americans had pulled off the unbelievable and unprecedented comeback, beating the Europeans 14.5 to 13.5. Now, there was a lot of criticism leveled not just at the American Ryder Cup team, but also at the gallery lining the fairways on this day. Colin Montgomery's dad left the golf course early on Sunday after the unrelenting jeering at his son throughout the weekend. Mark James said a fan spat at his wife when they found out who she was. It was an ugly display that marred a stunning weekend of golf. And now to another Justin that showed some long-range accuracy on this day. Scooting ahead to 2021, it was Justin Tucker connecting on the longest field goal in NFL history to beat the Detroit Lions. And just like in the previous story, there was a little bit of controversy. This was a Week 3 matchup between the Baltimore Ravens and the Lions at Ford Field. Baltimore was rolling along comfortably in this one, leading 16-7 heading into the fourth quarter. But the Lions were able to put a touchdown on the board, and then when Lions backup kicker Ryan Santoso, who had been moved off the Lions practice squad the day before, booted a 35-yarder through the uprights with 1:04 left to give Detroit the 17-16 lead, it was looking like the Lions were going to pick up their first win of the season. It looked even more promising when the Ravens faced a 4th and 19 from their own 16. But quarterback Lamar Jackson connected with Sammy Watkins for a 36-yard gain to get the Ravens just across midfield with 7 seconds to play. They tried to run one more play to get their kicker in a little better field goal range, but an incomplete pass stopped the clock with just 3 seconds to play. However, replays showed the play clock had gone to 0 before Jackson had snapped the football. It should have been a 5-yard penalty and backed the Ravens up, but it wasn't called, and on came Tucker to attempt the 66-yard field goal. He got just enough of it. The ball hit the top of the crossbar and bounced through. Another yard back, or 5 as it should have been, the ball would have come up well short. But it counted, and Baltimore won the game 19-17. Tucker's kick bested Matt Prater's 64-yarder that he'd kicked in Denver back in 2013. Lions coach Dan Campbell was obviously not happy with the loss and the lack of a penalty on the expired play clock, saying, "We'll get an apology from the league, and it doesn't mean anything." This loss kept Detroit in a death spiral. They would not pick up their first win until Week 13. On this day in 1981, it was a battle of the Titans in college football as top-ranked Southern Cal hosted number 2 Oklahoma in an early season matchup. Marcus Allen was the Trojans' senior running back, and he rolled up over 2,400 yards rushing in 1981, becoming the first collegiate running back to rush for 2,000 yards in a season. He also scored 22 touchdowns that year on his way to winning the Heisman Trophy. And not only was this a battle between 1 and 2, it was also a battle between the schools who courted Marcus Allen's services the most in the recruiting process 4 years earlier. Barry Switzer, the coach of the Oklahoma Sooners, was said to have been all but sleeping at Marcus Allen's house, trying to get him to come to Norman to carry the mail. But being from San Diego, Allen decided the West Coast Southern Cal life was much better. In this game, Allen would carry the ball 39 times for 208 yards and score twice. His second one brought the Trojans to within 3, 24-21. The Sooners ran the wishbone offense at this point, and they rolled up 307 rushing yards. Now, if they had been able to hold on to the football, this would have been a very different game. Instead, the Sooners treated the ball like it was a greased pig, coughing it up 10 times and losing 5 of those, and yet they still had a 3-point lead late in this ball game. The Trojans got the ball back with 4 minutes 30 seconds to play and 78 yards to go for a score. In the final drive, the Trojans would have a Marcus Allen 18-yard carry called back for holding, a player knocked out and brought back to reality by smelling salts. They drew up a play in the dirt that worked and faced a 4th and 1 with 50 seconds left and got it, and then nearly had a pass intercepted inside the 10-yard line. Here's ABC's Keith Jackson with the call from that day.
9 seconds to play. 3rd down. This may be it. Mazer. He's open. Running for the corner. Throws it. Touchdown. Cornwell. He redeemed it.
John Mazer hit tight end Fred Cornwell for the game winner with 2 seconds left. Cornwell had been the guy flagged for holding earlier in the drive, and then he had been the one to deflect a pass intended for his teammate that was nearly picked off a play earlier. So he figured the blame would be laid on him if they came up short, so he had to make amends. The Trojans' 28-24 win derailed the Sooners' season, even though this was only their second game on the schedule. Prior to this game, the Sooners had lost just 9 games in the previous 9 seasons. After this loss, Oklahoma tied Iowa State the following week, got destroyed by Texas in the Red River rivalry game, and then lost to Missouri and Nebraska later in the year. And let's finish off the day with this story. And let me ask a question first. If you needed to spend $39 with a chance to win $11 million, would you do it? I'm gonna guess that even the most cautious among us would be willing to give that a shot. Well, golfer Jim Furyk was not happy with his putting at the end of the season in 2010. For the first few days of the Deutsche Bank Championship leg of the FedEx playoffs in Boston, he'd putted a lot. And just like your average Joe weekend golfer, if the putts aren't dropping, it's not your stroke or your confidence or anything to do with you, really. It's obviously the putter that's the problem. So Jim went looking for a new one at Joe and Lee's Discount Golf Pro Shop in southeastern Massachusetts. Furyk found a Yes Golf Sophia putter that appealed to him. Regular price, $69, marked down to $39. What, did he find it in a bargain barrel? Nope, he found it in the swap shop. It was a used putter, and he never modified it once he got it, which was a bit unusual for him. He usually lofted any putter that he got, but he kept the Sophia as is. So now, scoot ahead to this day. It's the final round of the fourth leg of the Tour Championship, played at East Lake Golf Club in Atlanta. Playing with a bargain bin used putter, he proceeded to shoot a final round 70 to beat Luke Donald by a shot, and that win was worth $11,350,000. Now, sure, his other clubs helped, but we all know it was the putter that put him over the top. And time now for today's Got Zilch to Do with Sports, Did You Know? So, when do you think the first call from a mobile phone in a car happened? I'll give you a moment to get a year together in your head. All right, you got it? Well, I'm guessing you're off by a few years, unless you knew that the first call from a mobile phone in a car was made in St. Louis in 1948. That's all I've got for you today. This and every episode of This Day in Sports History is researched, written, voiced, and produced by me, Steve White. Enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll see you back here tomorrow for another edition of This Day in Sports History. This has been an original Thrive Suite production.